that enough is enough. That if you want to argue with us politically, that's fine. But once you lie and you attack families and you propagate these lies widely enough, but you also start dividing South African society, then it is totally unacceptable. Because race is a very inflammable factor in South Africa. At a time since Nelson Mandela, when we are trying to build one nation, we can't have people who use the kind of language that they've been using and the attacks that they've been using to divide us at the same time. So having consulted with our lawyers, so he'll give you the technical bit just now, we felt that there's a case for crimen injuria, which means you've harmed my dignity, you've harmed my person, you are also propagating hate speech as well amongst all South Africans, and that this combination of the attack on one's dignity, the attack on society more generally, propagating hate in society has to be stopped. And we invite all South Africans to join us, to say that we're not going to believe this nonsense. We are going to support those who are fighting corruption and trying to clean up this country, because we want a decent country for black professionals as much as we want a decent country for generations to come. And the damage that this activity causes is huge, and we'll only realize it years from now, because it weakens our economy. It in fact harms the advance of black people in professional positions and elsewhere in society, and there are a number of people who are being misled. But I think the truth is beginning to emerge, and as the truth begins to emerge, it's hurting these organizations and certain individuals personally in terms of their political ambitions as well, and you're getting these excessive reactions. But let Mr. Malati explain what's crimen injuria.
Just lastly, Minister, in short, the attacks that we of course saw on TV and so forth, how have they affected you personally, if in any way?
Like I said, politically we can expect people to differ with us, and we've had these differences over the years, so that doesn't matter. But you can't go around, for example, condemning the Zondo Commission. You can't call an evidence leader an advocate at the Zondo Commission by the name B. You can't call us dogs. And at the same time, you can't spread wrong rumors about families when there's absolute lies as well. So it's time to stand up, as we always have been, and there are many activists in this country and good South Africans who want this country to work, who want this economy to work, and who want us as a society to work as well. So it's time that justice takes its course.
Can we have a last one or two?
Yeah. Minister, sorry, Barry Bateman, Eyewitness News. Minister, you briefly touched on it there, but what comments in particular would you say have been the tipping point that you've got to the position now where you want to approach the police?
No, I think the statements outside the Zondo Commission and the efforts to disrupt the Zondo Commission, that's unacceptable. So there's a direct relationship between the disruptive activities, the personal attacks, and continuing and masking the corrupt activities that are actually going on, and blaming the whole world for everything, whereas all the fingers are pointing in a particular direction.
Sorry, one more. Can I go quickly?
Ladies first.
Thank you, Minister Gordhan. I just want to know, sir, you will be heading to the Equality Court as well. What do you hope to achieve there? And do you fear for the safety of your families?
Yes, there were remarks made outside the Zondo Commission which said there could be casualties. And if you go on attacking people the way you are attacking them, the next logical point is, are we facing some kind of physical harm or even elimination as a result of what are now exacerbated or exaggerated differences when in fact there's no actual place for that. So you're promoting hatred, and that is what the Equality Court is there to address. But like I said, I'm not the lawyer. The lawyer is here, but you wanted the last question.
So the follow-up question is, and you hinted at it, that this whole campaign suggests distraction, an attempt to draw attention away from what's happening in the Zondo Commission. Why do you think there's this sudden flurry activity from certain political parties related to the Commission?
I mean, for example, there's a bank that's got itself into trouble, but now suddenly I'm blamed for the trouble that the bank finds itself as a result of 2 billion rands disappearing from the bank. And that 2 billion rands belongs to funeral societies and poor people who've collected money in Stockfells and so on in Limpopo. Now, who got the money? You know, as a forensic investigator would say, follow the money. Don't follow the narrative. So there's lots of attempts at distraction, and I'm sure the South African public is far more intelligent and far more wise than people actually give them credit for, and will very soon, if they haven't already, can see through this fog that is being created and understand who's really responsible for what. But use the opportunity of a lawyer to understand these two issues like you've raised so that you are better advised.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Malachi, if you can just step forward for us. Okay.
Mr. Malachi, just take us through what happens now following these charges that have been laid, and just take us through the charges as well, please.
Yeah. Well, the charges are criminal injury and criminal defamation. We've also asked the SAPS to look at incitement to violence as a potential other complaint to be investigated. But essentially, if you look at a combination of a number of utterances and public statements made from in around July up to the final one last week, 20 November, it's clear that there's an unlawful and intentional act which is intended to injure Minister's dignity, and most importantly, it's invaded his privacy. So that's your criminal injury element, and criminal defamation is the publication of material which has injured his good name. So those are the two main complaints we've laid, but in parallel we said they should look at incitement to violence. And all the statements that were made are documented in the affidavit we've submitted.
So you will give the affidavit shortly.
Can I ask
And political.
Sir, can you identify who you have identified in these complaints as the suspects for potential investigation?
As the two main leaders of the EFF, Mr. Malema and Mr. Shivambu, and it's based expressly on what they've said in public domain.
Mr. Malachi, I heard that from Brooklyn you'll be heading to Equity Court. Could you explain what will be the charge that will be laying in your next one?
Just to conclude the last question, the process here is obviously the docket must be investigated, allocated a detective to investigate it, and then the process is in the hands of the police authority. In relation to the Equality Court, our complaint is effectively that Section 10 says you may not do certain things, and if you do, and Section 10 of the Equality Act, what we've advised Minister is, in addition to this criminal complaint that he has, he's got another complaint to prosecute at the Equality Court, and that relates to effectively a contravention of Section 10, and it is that those statements were hateful, they were intended to incite hatred, and therefore constitute hate speech. And in those proceedings, we're asking the court to order for an unconditional apology, and we're also saying that they should be ordered to pay damages, because it has to be painful if you're found guilty of conduct of that type. But those damages in the amount of 150,000 will be donated to a charitable cause intended to support job creation in an unemployment of our youth.
Mr. Malachi, just to give us clarity, will you be formally serving these leaders with intent to, of course, respond or appear in court? How exactly is it going to work moving forward when you're done with the Equality Court?
Well, at the Equality Court, we now heading there to issue the complaint. The clerk of the court there will be responsible for ensuring that the complaint reaches them, and that they've got a stipulated time period within which they must respond. And then there's an allocation of a presiding officer who will then determine how the matter progresses from there on.
Last question over there.
Yes. I just needed to ask, my name is Simpson. I needed to know if you guys, obviously you're looking at the legal point of view.
Which media house you're representing?
I'm working for Politics Institute. I needed to just ask a question to say, obviously looking at the legal point of view, but there's elections coming next year. Do you somehow maybe have advice on not to play into the political agenda of certain political parties? Sometimes you can follow legal route, but play into the agenda of a political party, and maybe you can end up with the wrong people winning while you fuel the fire, the political fire. I'm just
okay. I think we get the question. Thank you.
No. The politics of this is very simple. You don't ask a lawyer about that. that ultimately society must know who's working for them and who's cheating them at the end of the day. Secondly, we must know that under President Ramaphosa, we are undertaking a project of cleaning up our society, both in the private sector and the public sector, of any kind of corrupt activity, and he said that last night as well. And thirdly, remember, corruption doesn't hurt rich people. It actually hurts the poor people. You are deprived of jobs, of investment, of housing, of all sorts of things. And I don't think that we are communicating that adequately. So poor people are desperate, and they can, in their desperation, support the wrong things. But I think what we need to explain is the damage of corruption. When you steal 1 billion rands, you are actually stealing from the poor. You're not giving it to the poor, because you take the same money and you buy expensive cars, expensive clothing, and lead a life of luxury. And you leave the poor exactly where they are over the years. Our aim as the ANC is to continue to improve the lives of the poor, and that's the key. Thank you very much.
Thank you.